Before we start, I would be interested to just take a quick poll. How many UC alums do we have in the hall?
Abs. All right.
Whoa. I believe there's 1.7 million of you.
That's right.
So I don't know where the rest are tonight. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks very much.
So, some months ago, I saw a picture in the LA Times taken at a UC Regents meeting. And Jean will remember this too, because we've spoken about this. So, there was you and Jean were there, and there was a student, a lady student, female student, exercising her First Amendment rights to protest. And her method of protest, I think she'd taken her top off, and she was showering everyone with, I believe it was pink confetti.
Oh, they were fake dollar bills.
Fake dollar bills. But the expression on your face, and Jean's also, was something like, oh my God, what could possibly happen next? And I wondered, what is harder to deal with? Trying to stop Al-Qaeda infiltrating the United States, or disgruntled students from Berkeley?
All I'll say is the stakes are a little bit different, don't you think? Yeah. So I remember that Regents meeting very clearly, and that's one of the things that's challenging and fun about being the president of a university or chancellor of a campus is it gets crazy sometimes. And the University of California is a very big, complex public institution. When I left Arizona as governor, my state budget was about $9.8 billion a year. The budget of the University of California is about $27 billion a year. The university would be a moderately large state if it were a state with a large population of 18-year-olds to run. So all the skills or experiences I've had as a governor are coming into full force here.
Tell us about this mini state, or not so mini state. What state is it in?
Well, obviously, the University of California, I think we are really ready to do some exciting things. So I would say the state we are in is a state of excitement. It is propelled in part by the fact that we reached a multi-year budget deal with Governor Brown last spring. And it's much easier to plan if you can kind of depend on the fact that you're at least going to have this much. We're going to fight for more, but you know what your floor is going to be, and it was a much better floor than we had been able to anticipate based on the year before. So that enables us then not only to plan, but to really think about what does the university of the 21st century look like, what do our students want, or where do we fit within California and California's needs, and as was said, kind of our internal motto is we teach for California and we research for the world, and we want to keep up both of those activities in large dimensions.
I have to ask you, what is it like bargaining for money with Jerry Brown? How did that conversation go?
It was interesting. Seriously, it gave us, what happened, for those of you that don't know, is in the fall of, not this past year, but the year before, the Board of Regents accepted my recommendation, and the chancellors were part of this, that if we didn't get some additional money from the state, we would need to increase tuition. Tuition has been frozen. Had been frozen at that point by, I think, 3 or 4 years, 4 years, I believe. And that's the position the Regents took. And there was a lot of hullabaloo about that. And the governor proposed that he and I form a committee. and that the committee would have 2 members, the governor and me. And it was called the Committee of Two, or CO2. And work with me here, okay. And we had several meetings, and our staffs had some meetings, and I think they were very productive in the sense that it enabled us to really drill down on some issues that were of concern to him, some issues that were concerned to me. And, you know, as in all negotiated agreements, we gave up some things, he gave up some things, but again, it gives us a good base framework from which to work.
I've never really understood, how can a Jesuit not be for education? It seems that it's been hard to get that level of empathy from him.
Well, he and I both went to the same Jesuit university, so I don't know, different water fountains, I don't know. But we both went. He was not a graduate of, but he did attend Santa Clara University, and I, of course, was a graduate there.
But are you happy with the deal now? Is where you want to be?
I think so. I mean, again, there are some challenging elements to it, but they're good challenges to have, and the challenges we have are good public policy for California. I'll give you one example, and that is to add more California residents to our student body. And we have agreed. We had previously planned to add 10,000 students over 4 years. We're accelerating that to 3 years. So this year, for the fall of 16, we're aiming to enroll 5,000 more California students. That includes transfer students in the community colleges. It includes true freshmen. Now that's a lot of work, because not only do you have to have classrooms and laboratories and faculty and TAs, but you need to have eating facilities and housing, etc. But we listened very closely to Sacramento last year, and the key thing we kept hearing was more in-state residents need to be able to get into the University of California. So I say, message heard, message received. This is what we're doing. These are the challenges we have. Let's see if we can work our way through the problem.
I know the UC you have extensive financial aid programs at UC, but we have a bunch of interns that work for us. Almost all of them talk about student debt. What do you feel about that as a phenomenon, not just in California, but in the United States?
Well, I think I'm glad you asked that question in 2 parts, because the plain fact of the matter is that with the rise of for-profit higher education institutions, etc., you all just raise your hands back there if you can't hear me. But what we've seen is, through that and some other reasons, that student debt has been on the rise. Now, the University of California is a different story, because we have a very strong financial aid program. Every dollar we receive in tuition, 1/3 of it goes into return to aid. And that enables us to say that any student who comes from a family that makes less than $80,000 will pay no tuition or fees at the University of California. And it doesn't just stop at $80,000, it just begins to scale. And the end result of that, and some other student aid mechanisms that we have, is that when you're talking our in-state students, almost half of them graduate with no debt at all. Those who graduate with debt, the average is just about $20,000 for the entire 4 years. So, and we don't want that to go up, by the way. We'd like to ratchet that down, but I think we can all understand that for our undergraduates, this is a very affordable institution.
Give us a sense of the wider impact of the UC system on this state. Because it's a system without parallel, really, certainly in the United States and probably in the world.
Probably in the world, yes. California would not be California without the university. There are whole swaths of the California economy that are directly related to the University of California. Down here, the movie and film industry, agriculture, and the mechanisms of agriculture, say in the Inland Empire, the wine industry, biomedical industry, or medical device industry, Silicon Valley up in the Bay Area. I mean, I could go on and on, but the plain fact of the matter is that by virtue of decisions made by Californians 50, 60 years ago, there is a university that not only provides social mobility for students, but helps the California economy to be what it is today.
I want to ask you about the controversies that have been swirling around campuses over diversity, microaggressions, political correctness. I think on the one hand, we'd like to see more diversity in our universities. On the other hand, there's a feeling that on some campuses, the debate has gone too far in the other way, and people are feeling they can't really speak out. Where do you stand on that, and how do you see the UC system dealing with this rather complex social issue?
Well, it is complex, and if people had easy answers, those would be undertaken. I think a key ingredient is what I label to myself as active listening. Active listening means you're not only just saying, well, thank you for your suggestion, whatever, but you're taking them, you're thinking about them, you're challenging the students who raise some things. They say X, you say, well, that's an interesting idea, but what about Y? How would you feel about this? And to keep that dialogue persistent and consistent, and not have that dialogue only when something really bad has happened and the campus is in an uproar. And that's how we've tried to address these things at the University of California. Last year, there was a lot of concern about some actions at UCLA and some of our other campuses that were anti-Semitic in nature. The Board of Regents said this will not do. We need, as a board, to put out a policy that can then be used in a variety of different ways. Writing a policy or a set of principles against intolerance is a lot more difficult than you would think. But they put together a committee, they consulted with experts, they did all the rest, and so we will be, I think, one of the few universities that's been able to adopt such a policy in the United States, and I think we'll do it in March.
There was an interesting coda to that recently. So I guess the UCLA Medical Center got hacked last year. In fact, I got letters from them saying my two younger daughters' records had all been stolen, along with millions of other people, which was not pleasant to read. In response to that, you installed new hardware and software, I guess UC system-wide, to monitor digital use, sites being accessed and so on through the system. That then became target of a campaign, I think, particularly out of UC Berkeley, of students and faculty maybe who are concerned about their freedoms being impinged upon. How do you handle that type of situation? It's sort of the rerun of the NSA debate.
No, it's not really, and I think if you put the question that way, we lose the political debate. What we are doing is what every responsible institution does, which is that we are watching for malware that indicates that our systems have been hacked or that there's an intruder out there. We're doing it system-wide. Why? Because, and we've already seen this, those who seek to undertakes nefarious activities, usually attempted at more than one of our campuses and our national labs, et cetera. And so this is not an attempt to monitor at all what any kind of content is. It's really looking for a way to make sure that our cyber system remains safe and secure. And by the way, when there's a breach like we had at UCLA, it's a very, very expensive item for the university as a system. So just mailing out the notices like you got, that was $4.5 million right out the door. And so as a risk factor, it's important that we take that up. But we clearly have to do some active listening with some of the faculty in terms of this balance between security and privacy.
Let me ask you, if I may, a question or two about the Homeland Security experience you had. Where do you feel we are now in terms of protecting our homeland? How much more do we have to do? We had this big shock here in San Bernardino, which no one saw coming.
Yeah.
Tell me how you feel about our state of safety preparedness. Yeah.
I think, from a Department of Homeland Security perspective, it is really tough to start a new federal department. This is the third largest department of the U.S. government, next to DOD and the VA. And then you have Department of Homeland Security, and you had 23 different agencies from all kinds of legacy departments, kind of clustered under one department label. They had, we didn't even have a common email system, and we were located in 80 some odd buildings spread around the District of Columbia. There were 105 congressional committees and subcommittees that asserted jurisdiction over the department.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that the one recommendation of the 9/11 Commission that had no activity on it was the recommendation that Congress reform itself where oversight of the department was concerned. So I had the pleasure I testified 55 times in my 5 years as secretary, and that was a challenge. However, the question is, are we better off now than we were before? I think from kind of a nuts and bolts, how you do it, how you recognize threats, how you mitigate threats, we are better off than we were prior to 9/11. Have we eliminated threats? No. San Bernardino illustrates that these are risks that are now part of life, unfortunately, in the United States. So you have to do everything you can to reduce the nature of those risks, the frequency of those risks, and then you have to improve your ability for communities to respond physically, to respond by law enforcement, to respond medically, et cetera. And I think we're better off there now than we were before as well.
What scared you most when you were head of Homeland Security?
I mean, how did I rank the threats? Well, I'll tell you, when I served as secretary, we continued to get information about threats to the aviation system. And we did have, in December of '09, Umar Farouk Abdulmuttalib, the so-called underwear bomber, who did manage to get on a Detroit-bound plane from Amsterdam on Christmas, and he was not able to detonate an explosive on the plane. He had it in his underwear, but he came too close for comfort, and as a result, we ended up amending, changing how we deal with international travelers bound for the United States, where checks are done, where data is exchanged in terms of who's purchased a ticket and the like. So aviation was a threat. We had the rise, you had the al-Qaeda kinds of threats, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, etc. ISIS was beginning to develop. So all those kind of terrorism, counterterrorism activities were of deep, deep concern when I served as secretary. I'm sure they're of deep concern to my successor. One change I saw during I was secretary for almost 5 years, was the increase in cyber and cyber threats. And so that's in part why, as when we saw what happened at UCLA and understood, the scope of the issue, et cetera, we moved very quickly to make sure we got our arms around that particular risk.
You have, I think, 1.7 million alums of this system.
We do, yes.
Do you...
Living alums.
Do you utilize that network enough, I wonder?
I don't think so. I think we could do more with our alums. And I think one of the things with public universities in this era is we can no longer depend solely on tuition and state appropriations to meet our budgetary needs. We need to continue to monitor our own costs and keep those down as much as we can, and then we need to develop a new revenue model, and part of that model has to be the engagement of the alumni. Private universities have been doing this for a long time. Like you show up your first day freshman year and they're giving you your alumni application. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. I mean, that's, and the University of California is going to have to do some of the same things.
How do you, I don't want to push you too much, but how do you get that philosophy into a public institution? We have Max Nikias just down the road here at USC, who is a fundraising machine from day one, and phenomenal. He's raising $6 billion, and I know that UCLA has been on a big fundraising, but it's harder moving a public body. How do you change the direction of that ship?
Well, I think, first of all, we get more people in the university community involved, and that means department chairs and deans, and not just, say, the chancellor and one or two people in the alumni office. It's going to have to be a whole community effort.
So you're changing job descriptions, effectively.
Well, you are adding the notion of increased revenue to the requirements of being in administration. Yes.
And I'm sure you meet resistance.
I don't think so. I think really what we need is, I don't know how to do it. So you have these really smart people, and they have PhDs and they've won all kinds of awards. They never asked for money. Now I must say I was a candidate at one time. I was in active political life, and I know how to do that, ask for money. That's what you do in politics, and those are the kinds of things, unfortunately, but part of the deal we need to share. Why? Because we want the UC to remain and thrive as the #1 public university in the world.
So I want to open it up to questions. Before I do, let me ask you one more question. Would you be a candidate again? Dianne Feinstein won't be there forever.
I like my job now. Thank you very much.
We have a microphone.
Okay. It's been quite a while since I was at UCLA.
All right.
And at that time, they had a master plan for education that I think that was developed in the 50s, which tried to have a goal of a free education at the university. I was wondering if this has several parts, by the way, so don't take it away. If there's still any hope for having a free education. So one question is, has there been an updated master plan, and is there any hope for that? And the third is, as part of the University of California, the research was a major part of the purpose of the university. And I noticed that in a lot of universities, and I don't know if it's true in state universities or in California, that much of the research is privately held. I mean, they patent things. And I was wondering if this is done in public universities too, or if just in private universities, people tend to patent what they develop?
Yeah, so the master plan was the plan that Clark Kerr, who was president of the University of California, and Governor Pat Brown, and others arrived at, 50, 60 years ago. And it is the plan that set up the community college districts and the notion that you would have 2-year community colleges. Some degrees only require 2 years, but this is also a way to begin your road to a 4-year degree. The master plan envisioned the Cal State University system, which are what is in the industry called comprehensive universities, 4-year comprehensive universities, and then and it envisioned that students who were, say, in the top half of their class to the top 9% or so would get into the Cal State, and then you have the University of California, which was envisioned as the research university, the university where professional schools were located, and where approximately the top 9% of the high school class would be eligible for admission. And you know, that plan, there's been some, you know, line blurring in some areas, but by and large, it is the plan still for higher education in California. And I must say, coming from a neighboring state where we didn't have that kind of framework and where there was a lot of overlapping and duplicative programs and degrees, et cetera, that California really got it right. And so I have not heard of a movement to really change the master plan. If anything, I've heard of a movement to strengthen the concepts embodied in the master plan. Now, are we ever going to return to free tuition in California? Would that were so. But I don't think in this era that we're going to see that. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that. So our goal, as I mentioned in the early part of the program, is to keep any tuition increases as low and predictable as possible, generally tied just to the rate of inflation.
You mentioned the University of the 21st century. What is that? What is your vision? Where is this public institution going in the next 20, 30 years?
Well, I think, well, first of all, and I'll go back to the prior question, I think the university of the 21st century has to be heavily involved in research, and research that is aimed at some of the grand challenges facing the state, the nation, and the world. I think we have to have mechanisms by which basic research and researchers have access to developing intellectual property, and so their developments can ultimately enter the market in the world. I think the University of the 21st century has to be as diverse as we can be, both in the faculty and the student bodies, recognizing, of course, in California the limitation of Proposition 209, but we live in one of the most diverse parts of one of the most diverse countries in the world, and higher ed is such an engine of social mobility for all that we need to make sure those doors remain open. And I think, finally, we need to keep exploring new ways of pedagogy. You know, how do students learn today? What kinds of things go through their neural patterns? Their brains are wired a little bit differently than ours were, certainly than mine is. So, I think a university of the 21st century has to keep challenging itself in that arena as well.
Given the recent attention toward on-campus sexual assault, what is the UC system doing to prevent it? So,
you know, on-campus sexual assault you know, what we did at the University of California is say, as a basic value, that our students should feel safe and secure on campus. So on-campus sexual assault will not be tolerated. What we found, however, is that that is easier said than done because every campus had its own way of doing things. They had their own procedures, they had their own sanctions, and so what we decided to do was to create a system-wide task force on sexual assault, included students, included faculty, included staff. They set up a new system-wide framework for how complaints can be brought, a new framework in terms of the rights of the complainant and the rights of the person against whom a complaint is lodged, and what the sanctions are, so that we begin really to have consistency across the university. And every member of the university community has to take an online training course or a live one, most do it online, regarding the law and the process and procedures about sexual assault.
How does somebody go from having the highest security clearance in the land one day to not needing one the next day? Talk about cold turkey. And did you have a security clearance, I'm sorry, a security detail after you left the department?
Oh, that's a really, okay, so I had a security detail from the time I was elected governor of Arizona. So that was in 2002. And, you know, when you have a security detail all the time, after a while, they're just part of the, they're there, you get used to it. Your friends think it's kind of weird, but, you know, it's, you know, and you become friends with some of them, actually. When I took this job, this is kind of a funny story. So I flew out to Kansas City, still had my security detail, and they were doing the handoff. So I visited some family in Kansas City. Then we flew to Oakland, which is where my residence is, and they drove me over to the residence of the president of the University of California, and there were some university police guys there, and they basically said, "Here she is, bye," and you know, the baton was transferred. So, and I don't, you know, quite frankly, the kind of security I had then is not appropriate and not the kind of security I need now. I must say that the following Saturday, I had someone drop me off. There's a farmer's market very close to where I live on Saturday mornings. And there was this moment where I was buying peaches. And I was like, I'm buying a peach. I'm by myself. I can buy a peach by myself, you know? And it really hit me that some of the privacy that I had not enjoyed for those years, I now could enjoy.
I think we're over here.
And I still have my security clearance, by the way, because of the national labs.
They all eat peaches.
Hello. So I was recently in Palm Desert meeting with some people, and they mentioned how excited they were about the eventual occurrence of a UC out there. I'm not sure if, judging by your expression, whether or not, you know, they were accurate, especially because upon asking any details, the only thing they could say was how exciting they were. So I was wondering if you could shed any light on that.
Not really, because our plan now is we're focused on building out the Merced campus so that it can accommodate 10,000 students by the year 2020. They have about 6,500 now. But the plain fact of the matter is that having a UC campus is a tremendous boon for a community from an economic standpoint, among other things. I mean, you can already tell the difference in Merced because of the fact that there's a campus there. And if you look at California in terms of where the economy is really hot and humming, there's always a UC right there. So it doesn't surprise me that many are being hopeful about another campus. But new campuses are extraordinarily difficult and expensive to construct, and my concern and my focus is on making sure that campuses we do have get the resources they need. And right now, that's really the fight on our hands.
Hi, thank you for talking about the university in the 21st century. I'm wondering if you could say more about that, especially around the idea of the university being a focal point for thinking about culture, society, and politics, not just the marketplace.
Yeah, so that's one of the great things about a university is, and to have an environment where there can be research and discussion about some of the big issues confronting the world, and hopefully where the discussion is evidence-based and data-driven. And because particularly in the social sciences, that's where there is a terrific need to inform public policy with best practices that are based, as I said, on solid evidence and data. And then I think one of the things we need to do more of at the University of California is help translate that work to the work of policymakers, be they in Sacramento, be they local, be they in DC or elsewhere. So, and you know, I think, you know, we talk about STEM and STEM majors all the time, but when you talk to the big, the Googles of the world and Apple, et cetera, they also want students who can communicate clearly, who can work in teams, and who can do that kind of research and work to inform what they're doing.
As a 10th grader in high school right now, studying in the field of engineering and technology, how are you looking forward to further enhance technology into the UC schools?
First of all, engineering and technology are some of our fastest growing majors. One of the things we need to do, quite frankly, is refurbish some of our buildings and make sure that we're adding faculty because of the popularity and the need for such majors, and we are busy at work doing that. We're also busy supporting projects that are multi-campus in nature and bringing together campuses to work jointly on projects and to share the information they have. And we have a big emphasis on making sure students are part of this, and they're getting that experience of working on research projects, on design studio work, on you name it, that they are part and parcel of it.
Let's make this the last question, please.
When I was at UCLA, we had a diverse group of speakers that we could go to, and sometimes we agreed with them, sometimes we didn't. These days there seem to be small groups of students or larger students who prevent speakers with opposing views from coming to campus. What is the UC response to that?
Yeah, and we've had a couple of episodes, and this was kind of a wave over the last few years of preventing speakers from even taking the stage or speaking at commencement. That a couple years ago, that was the deal. I think that as much as possible, we try to anticipate when there could be such a thing with a speaker and talk with the students beforehand about the importance of civility and tolerance and understanding that most complex questions have different points of view involved with them. And then to make sure that our speakers' First Amendment rights are respected and embraced. We are universities. Universities have a lot of complex things flying around, a lot of differences of opinion. That's what makes them such amazing institutions. We don't want to lose that. Yeah.
Let me, in finishing, just thank Chip Robertson again for helping to make this possible at UCLA School of Management. UCLA Anderson School of Management, thank you so much. And thank you so much for helping us.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you all.